Yes, okay. Hello. It's been a while, I'm sorry. I know my schedule has been that I'm supposed to upload once every month. I haven't. Sorry, July came and went with all the curveballs, and July can pretty much go fuck itself. And unfortunately, one of the curveballs is still ongoing. So, and it's gonna be ongoing for 5 to 6 months. I'm not quite sure how that's gonna affect everything, but it's probably going to mean that videos are not going to be as regular as they had been up to this point, which I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do. It's life, it sucks, it's how it is sometimes. So that was that thing, curveballs, and why it hasn't been in videos. Thing number 2 is I did buy some things from a thrift store in June, didn't buy anything in July, again, that month, go fuck itself. And I have bought I have bought a few things in August so far. So I'm thinking of doing a collected thrift haul at the end of August or the beginning of September of August and June. So that's the plan so far. Hopefully I'm gonna get to execute that. So again, curveball. Anything else? Yeah, haven't cut my bangs in the last video that I made. I'm gonna get my bangs cut. I haven't, so now they're even longer and I'm getting a bit of a side fringe going on. So just have to live with that. I also need to re-dye my hair because it needs it badly. Again, life right now, deal with it. I have to deal with it, so you have to deal with it too if you watch this video, I guess. Although you can just, you know, click off it if you want to, but no. I'm hoping you aren't going to stay because there is a little bit of a point to this video, because I didn't feel like just sitting down and giving a bit of a life update. I wanted to do something else. And just the other day I finished this book. I bought it a while back and I showed it off in a thrift haul because I bought it at the thrift store for next to nothing, so that's nice. And I said I would give a bit of a review on it. So I'm gonna try to do that, and I'm gonna try not to ramble too much in the review, which is going to be difficult because this book is a little bit all over the place. So I'm gonna try, go through the motions. Hopefully you're going to get the gist of what I'm trying to convey, and I'm gonna try to convey it without too much rambling. So we're gonna see how it goes. I think this is time number 12. I'm trying to film this because I end up rambling when I get to this book. It's that bad. So yeah, also sorry. Wearing a corset, I didn't think this through. Anyone who's ever worn a corset out there, you probably feel me right now, because I wanna sit down comfortably, but I have to, like, if I want to do that, I have to do the lean, and that doesn't look very good on camera. So I just have to sit back up and just deal with it, because I don't want to change. I just got into the corset, I don't want to have to take it off again. So yeah, the book, the review, let's go, no more rambling. So, this book is called The Book Without a Name. It's by Anonymous. There's no name to this book. So, I'm just gonna assume the author is a he. For no other reason than, I don't know. I'm just gonna say he. I'm sorry if that's not politically correct, but I'm just gonna say he. So yeah, this book is about this mysterious book in a library that doesn't have a title, it doesn't have an author, and it's not registered in a library, but every once in a while someone finds it on the shelf, checks it out, reads it, and dies. Anyone who has ever checked out this book have read it and died. So that's sort of the premise of the story. I thought, because that's what it says on the back, but no. There's just thrown so much more into the mix, and the book becomes a secondary storyline, which is a shame because I really liked the premise of that. Now, what does the main thing of this book then become? It becomes a jewel, this blue jewel, and it's called the Eye of the Moon, I believe, if I remember correctly. Again, there's so much, yeah, the Eye of the Moon, a magical blue jewel. There's so much in this book. I'm gonna forget some things, I'm gonna leave some things out, because if I get into everything, it's gonna take forever, and I'm gonna get confused, and you're gonna get confused, because there's just so much. But yeah, the Eye of the Moon, this blue jewel, on one hand it's very, very precious, it's worth a ton of money. On the other hand, it has these magical powers. Apparently it can make you immortal if you wear the stone. So, this is the premise. It starts out with the jewel being stolen from a monastery and brought to a city where it kind of disappears, and then everyone seems to be hunting this stone down. And from the monastery, two warrior monks are sent to this town to retrieve the stone and bring it back before you have a solar eclipse. Because when the solar eclipse happens, if the stone is to fall into the wrong hands during that eclipse, hell's gonna break loose and nothing's ever gonna be the same, and the world is doomed. Now, at the same time, there's also been a lot of murders in this city, and they have been a special kind of murder. So a special agent from the US is sent to this city, and I believe the city is supposed to be somewhere in South America. I'm not quite sure about that. It's the southern hemisphere at least, when the climate is described, but again, the descriptions in this book are a bit vague. So, however, this detective or agent goes down there, and he is very special in that he's sent out to jobs around the world, always regarding supernatural occurrences, incidents or crimes. So this is his job. He's sent there to figure out what is going on with these murders, and in the process he of course ends up being a part of this whole hunt for the blue stone. And the book does play a part in the story in that it holds the entire secret backstory to this jewel and to the people of this town, and why everything is going as it is, and why this seems to have happened several times before. So again, as you can hear, there's a lot going on to the story. Now the problem, like on the surface, it sounds really good, really interesting, really, really fun. The problem is, you're not given a reason to care. That's my main problem with this book. I just didn't care. So yeah, for me this book was a disappointment. Like, if I had never picked it up, if I had never read it, I would not have missed it in my literary life, basically. And having spent the money on it, having read it, it kind of feels like I wasted a bit of time on it, honestly. Now, why didn't I care? I just gave you this amazing plot, and now just say I didn't care about it. Yes, I didn't care because the author does not give me a reason to care. When I care about a story, I do not put the book down. I love reading. Like, for example, Harry Potter. When I got the 4th book in the series, I got it on a Friday afternoon. Sunday morning around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, I was done with that book. Because I had to keep reading. I had to know what happened to the characters and to the wizard world and everything. I needed to know because I cared. This book, I didn't care at all. Because on the one hand, the author has featured way too much without giving all of that stuff enough space to develop so that you would care about it. Because it's about 380 pages, so it's quite a slim novel. It's a quick read in that regard. So yeah, when you have a lot of, because there's so many characters and you change perspective so many times following different characters, and they all seem to be main characters in many respects. Though a lot of them do get axed off, along the way, which is fine. It thins out the characters. But there were a lot of characters where I had a problem distinguishing between them, because they're not given enough time to develop on the page and develop to the reader. So when it comes to too many things, okay, let me start from one end, try not to ramble. Too many things from one end, and then we're just gonna go, move through go through the motions, I think. So there are way too many themes in this book. There's Western theme, there's horror, there's supernatural theme, there's detective crime story. There's also a mystery going on. There's also a bit of a romance story going in there, and there's a gothic kind of theme. And it's just way too much. I wish he had focused on a few of those themes a lot more, and then just used the others to like sprinkle a little bit of flavor into the story as well, instead of trying to force everything together. I could have done without the Western theme, for example. It made sense in the book to some extent, but for me it wasn't enjoyable. I was much more interested in the mystery horror aspect of the book and the detective side of things. So the Western theme, I don't know why he put it in there. I could have done without it. So that's one thing. And then when it comes to the characters, the things that I'm supposed to latch onto, he doesn't describe them enough, but he also describes them a bit too much. Which sounds weird, but let me explain it this way. When you can have a character that's a blank slate, like Bella Swan from the Twilight series. I'm personally not a fan, but I can see why a lot of teenage girls, when reading this book, when it came out, really liked her, because she was a blank slate. They could put themselves in her shoes and live the story through her. And that can be a very powerful tool. However, these characters, they have just enough information to not make them blank slates, while also not having enough information for you to really care and connect with them in any way. So that's a problem. For example, the detective who comes down to investigate all of this, he is such a run-of-the-mill detective that he just kind of fell into the background in many cases. He didn't have a lot of personality. The one thing that I noticed about him was that he was a man of color. And that was mostly because when some of the bad guys insulted him, they used derogative phrases and derogative words. They didn't use the N-word, but they did use other things. Again, this was translated, so I'm not quite sure what the equivalent would have been in the English version. But yeah, didn't use the N-word. So that's not quite enough. But then again, he was given just enough personality. So I'm just gonna switch around here a little bit. Oh, getting comfortable in my corset. For you to just kind of been able to distinguish him from the other cops. There were some characters I cared about. There was a bartender. He was a mean bastard, but he was kind of fun when the story was told from his perspective. So that was okay. There was a couple. I cared about them quite a bit, but that was mostly because they were deeply in love, and I cared about their relationship to each other because they were perfect for each other. And I was like, I hope you guys get out of this alive, because you seem to really care about each other, and I want you guys to be happy. So that was okay. And then there was a fortune teller. I don't know why that word's so difficult for me. Fortune teller. I liked her. Unfortunately, she's a very minor character, so she's not really featured in the book. But in the parts that she was, I really liked her, and I wish I could have had more of her. Other characters I didn't really care about. There were the monks. I didn't really care about them. Live, die, succeed. Every time I got to the chapters where it was from their perspective, it was a chore getting through. There were the assassins, the hitmen that you could hire in the town. Didn't care for them either. There were some of the other cops. didn't really care for them either. Again, I just didn't care, because I didn't... You can have a book with lots of different perspectives, but it's quite difficult to then also give them enough time and space when you have a lot of them to make them all feel like a main character that you should care about. You can have secondary and background, minor characters and background characters and secondary characters that you can care a lot about without having to flesh them out completely as much as the main character, because of their relationship with the main character, because of how the main character would care about them. And that's not the case here. People don't really care about each other in this book, except from that couple that's in love, and I was like, well, I think that's why I latched onto them, because they actually seem to care. So yeah, I think that was the main problem with the book, and also some of the descriptions, because on the one hand, the town that the story took place in felt very full of people. But then you had the island with the monastery where the monks came from, the ones who were going to retrieve the jewel and bring it back to the monastery. That felt incredibly empty. I wish if the author had spent a bit more time on that, fleshed it out, made it feel like a bustling kind of place with a community, with a lot of friendships and sense of family and belonging. I would have cared a lot more about the monks being able to get back to that at the end of the book, because they would have something to go back to. You only really hear about 3 people at the monastery. It felt so empty. When I imagined this place in my mind as I was reading it, it was an island with a lot of empty buildings. There was no life there, so that was a big problem for me, and again, a reason why I didn't care. So yeah, I think that was the characters. Anything minor I want to mention? Yeah, there are vampires in this. Funny enough, it was a different kind of vampire than that I have seen in other literature, or that I have read from other literature. So that was quite interesting, but they also they weren't fleshed out enough for me to understand the rules behind them, like strength, weaknesses. You know, when you have a magic system, you have a set of rules usually that you can sort of follow. And even a book as criticized as Twilight had a set of certain rules for the vampires and as well as the werewolves. In this book, there weren't really any rules. Nothing was ever really explained. So they were vague, but not vague enough. So again, it was all in this very confusing in-between kind of space for me. So yeah, the vampires. And also a lot of this, when it came to the mystery being unraveled in the end and you started getting the answers, some of the things I saw coming like a mile away, very obvious. But there was also a lot of other stuff where I was like, it wasn't set up properly. Going back to the Harry Potter book, the 7th book, the way that J.K. Rowling had been setting up everything from book number 1 all the way to the end of book 7, everything was sort of connected, and you understood, oh, this is why this and that in those earlier books. Everything was connected and it was built up very, very well. In this book, all of a sudden things started happening now, and it came out of nowhere. And it made no sense. So it wasn't a satisfying ending or conclusion to everything that had been going on. And the main thing about this book that I had been looking forward to was the book without a name itself. In the library, you know, what did it contain? Why was it such a secret? Why was it hidden in there? Why was it such a big secret of whatever was in there? And you do get a bit of answers here and there. And one of the characters actually end up reading a bit about the book, and you get to join in as the reader yourself. And it was so interesting and fascinating, and I wish that had been featured more in the book. I would have loved that. It was so interesting and fascinating. But the problem was I was given enough to know that it was interesting, but I was not given enough to not leave that part of the book feeling starved. Again, you often want to leave your reader being like, I want more, but you don't want to leave them starved. Same with answers and conclusions. You want them to be like, I got the answers and I got the conclusions, but damn, I want more story. Didn't get that here either. And I still have a couple of questions. Like this blue stone, stolen from the monastery, it seemed to have been going on several times for several years, and it's just, why does it keep happening? Why have you not got it somewhere else than the monastery? Why have you not decided to protect it better? Why do you allow this to keep happening? There was never really any explanation about what the monks were all about, what kind of belief system they had, and it was never really explained why they were martial arts experts. Like, I kind of figured that it was because, okay, we keep losing the stone to the bad guys, so we keep having to send people over there to retrieve it, and so they need to be able to defend themselves. That's just what I figured. I don't know if that's the case, because it's never explained, but that's the thing. Also, the hitmen in the book, there are quite a lot of them. Again, the town that it takes place in is a hotbed of crime and corruption, and so you need a lot of people killed, along the way if you want to go to the top. So a lot of hitmen are in this town. And the author tries to, when they're first introduced, to make them extremely scary and bad and vile people. But at the same time, then when you have to follow them from their perspective, they seem like decent people. It's just, it seems like you're following different characters. And also, he sets them up to be very, very, very bad and vile. And then it seems like he doesn't go through with it. Like, the worst characters in the books, he's like, oh, they are thieves, murderers, and rapists. And then he tries to make them very likable and fun. And he sort of just forget the rapist part. Like, a lot of times these hitmen are then surrounded by beautiful women that they are hitting on and trying to, seduce into coming home with them. And the women end up not going home with them because they're not interested, they just want a few free drinks. But you kind of get the sense when they're first introduced that they would just take whatever woman they wanted, and then he doesn't follow through on that. It's like he's afraid of making them really, really bad people. Or maybe he want them to be bad guys, but he wanted them to be enjoyable, fun bad guys that you didn't mind rooting for or latching onto in some sense. So he tried to go down one road and then changed his mind and went down another. Again, not consistent. No consistency there. So yeah, overall, do not recommend this book. But I didn't want it all to be negative, so I do have a book recommendation, which is this bad boy. This is The End of Mr. Y. I also bought this secondhand. It's also in Danish. I do think it will be a lot better in English, the original language it's written in. It's by Scarlett Thomas, and it is amazing. It has sort of the same premise as the book without a name, in that this is also about a book that when you read it, you die. Basically, there's this one book called The End of Mr. Y, written by a famous author, and apparently there's only this one copy of the book. And everyone who has ever read it, from the author himself to his editor, to everyone else who has ever got their hands on it, have died. However, it's mostly legend, because no one knows if it really exists. Rumor has it, it's in Germany somewhere in a vault. That's all you know. Now this starts out with the main character. There's one main character in this, you only follow her. The main character ends up finding the book in the very beginning of this book, and then you go on the ride with her. And it's such a good book. I will advise you though, have Google nearby, because you want to be able to Google a lot of stuff. There's a lot of science, there's a lot of philosophy, there's a lot of literature. There's also a lot of places and names you would like to Google because everything ties in to each other in this. One thing you shouldn't Google until you're done with the book is the main character's name. when you're completely done with the book, if you feel like there's something you haven't had answered, Google the main character's name, and you're very likely to get the answers that you were looking for. At least that's what happened to me. Because I read the last line and I was like, I'm missing something. Is there something I haven't Googled? Hadn't Googled her name, Googled it, and everything made sense. It was like an eye-opening experience, and it made everything so much better when I realized the journey she had gone through and how it just all made sense. Now, also, this book is written in first person present tense. That's not very common, so you might have to read a few pages to just get over that little hump. I had to, but when you're over it, it's gonna take off. Also, the main character in this, she's not very likable. She's not very likable. And that's because she seems very detached from other people. Now, I sort of got the sense that she might be an Aspie. I'm an Aspie myself, so I got the sense that she might be an Aspie in her interactions with other people. However, when you Google her name, that's also an explanation why she's very unlikable. But still, you do care about her, and you're rooting for her, and you want to know where everything is going. This right here is a gothic action story done right. It's so good. It's really, really good. And it's very cleverly written. Like, nothing is in here by accident or by chance. Scarlett Thomas, everything in here, everything she put in here, purposefully. So, I recommend The End of Mr. Y by Scarlett Thomas. And I will tell you to avoid The Book Without a Name by Anonymous. So, yeah, I guess that's my recommendation and book review. Hopefully it was okay. I think this was the least rambly take I've done. That says a lot, I think. But yeah, I think this is going to be it. I'm gonna go now, and hopefully I'll be back in a few weeks with my thrift haul, and hopefully you'll be there too. So yeah, bye.